Welcome to Speak as One. I'm Julie Corrieth. Today we have Dr. Arna Erega with us and Brandon Davis. Hi, guys.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for being here. So I'm going to just dive right in. Brandon, you're here with us as a basketball player at Texas State University. The reason we are here today is to talk about mental health and athletes. And Dr. Arna, I know that you are a sports counselor and work at UT. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Sure. I'm trying to think where to start. So I was an athlete myself from a very young age, and I went to D1 school. I ran track, 100-meter hurdles, and so throughout my athletic career, I developed this interest in, sports psychology and performance psychology. And I had sport counselor as a teenager in high school. And I found that tremendously helpful, just in not only shaping me as an athlete, but as a person. And so once I started my educational journey from like undergrad, master's, doctoral level, everything kind of focused on athletes and mental health and wellness and well-being and self-care and what does that look like. So now I'm here.
And here. Yeah, can you tell us where you're from?
Yeah, so I'm from Croatia originally. I got an athletic scholarship at the University of Nebraska. And so after my journey there, I used all of my eligibility. I decided to run professionally for a few years, and I was training for 2012 Olympics. And then dealt with some pretty serious injuries, which also shaped me as an athlete and definitely had an impact on my mental health as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. One, I'd love to hear why did you decide to start seeing a sports psychologist when you were a teenager? Were there some things going on with you personally?
Yeah, so it initially started because my dad was my coach. And so that was an interesting dynamic at home. And also, as a teenager, hormones are kicking you left and right and you think you know everything. And things just became very overwhelmed because I was taking sport pretty seriously. And so couple years into like 14, 15, I also developed like an eating disorder. So that it became very important to talk to somebody about. I wasn't comfortable talking to my parents about it because it would just create drama at home and it didn't feel like the safest place. But talking to my sport counselor, I was like, I knew she wasn't going to judge me. I knew that she's going to help me get on a right track because I knew deep down that it's not helpful, right? There's some sort of distortion going on. And so once I came to college, I also knew, okay, I need to find someone because I didn't want to backtrack on eating disorder. At that point, things were kind of under control. But freshman 15 for me was more like freshman 25 when I first got here. So that triggered a lot of those eating disorder things. And so continuing throughout my entire college career, I had a counselor that was directly affiliated with track and field team. So I definitely took advantage of that.
Wow, yeah, thanks for sharing that because I've heard that there are certain sports specifically where I hear more about girls and women dealing with the eating disorders, but that it can be a very prominent reason why people then go out and hopefully to seek help.
Yeah. And men are not excluded. We don't hear about it. We hear
right.
We're like, okay, women are being impacted, especially gymnastics, track, swimming sometimes. But we should not forget about the men because they are definitely impacted, body dysmorphia and things like that should be assessed for and addressed and talked about.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I do say usually, and I am understanding and starting to learn more about men and eating disorders and domestic abuse and things that we don't often hear where men are talked about in that area. And I'd love to know more from you on this, Brandon. Brandon, thank you for joining us. So you were raised in Louisiana. When did basketball start becoming a, force in your life?
I would say at 7 years old. I started playing football, but I ended up getting injured and chose to take a different route with a sport just to stay active. So I decided to play basketball, and so I've been doing since.
Okay. Did you, I kind of like to go off of what Dr. Arna was talking about. Do you hear about eating disorders and with any of your friends or amongst men? And
Yeah, I've had a couple friends had eating disorders due to depression, and just mental health. I didn't really know what it was until they told me about it, and I did my research on it, and it's a real thing, a serious thing.
yeah, so was that more in high school or is that then since you started college?
College.
Okay. In high school, did you ever hear about mental health or were you aware of mental health or?
I didn't. It wasn't really forced in high school. Like it wasn't really a main topic in high school. I think nowadays it's more of a subject that's spoken about. But in high school, not really.
And so then you came to Texas State after high school, is that correct?
No, I actually this is my fourth stop.
Uh-huh.
I went to LSU Eunice for my first year out of high school. Then I went to Delgado. Then I went to Loyola New Orleans. Now I'm here. So
Okay.
it's been a journey.
It's been a journey. And so during that process, how, as an athlete, are you able to maintain that like mental mindset of, kind of transferring schools and, in general, I think people going from high school, going to college can be it's a completely different atmosphere and it can bring up a lot for people, but kind of going through those transitions as an athlete, going to different schools, how are you able to maintain that like mental mindset around it?
Just really trusted God and trusting the work he put in out of high school. I mean, every athlete wants to go to Division I school out of high school, but God have different plans at the end of the day. So just having faith that it's gonna work out in the end and not giving up. That's what really just kept me pushing. And my support home, back home, and the genuine people who care about my career. It just kept me grounded. But I definitely went through mental depression in the beginning and recently, but just trusting the process is really what's been getting me through.
When you were feeling some of that depression, were there things that you would use? Were there resources or people you would talk to?
At first, I just prayed about it. And then I realized, God can bring certain people in your life to have conversations with, to help you out. So then I ventured more into speaking with people, family, friends back home, and just people that I trust with, my mental health.
Yeah.
And those discussions.
Yeah, that's so important to keep, sometimes I think that when people are dealing with depression, they can feel shame around that and stop talking about it because it is such a personal issue that you're dealing with. But it does seem that if we can keep our community, and even if it's just a couple of people you trust, to talk to, find those people you can talk to about it, then it's really helpful. And then ultimately, if you can find, somebody who's a professional and I think that that's such a personal decision. And sometimes it may not get to that point of, you need to find a professional, like you had your friends in your faith and that ended up, being helpful for you. When, Dr. Arna, do you feel like, how can people gauge when they really need to start seeking help?
No, that's a really good question because personally, my philosophy is why are we waiting until somebody has, symptoms of depression or dealing with a challenge or Brandon said, just dealing with transition from one institution to another. I feel like we should be teaching kids just like how to be mindful, how to recognize what's going on internally. Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling triggered? Am I feeling irritated? Is my focus being impacted? And so those are all the things that you can do at any point in time. And when you start noticing that your everyday functioning is being impacted, like you go to practice, but you're really struggling to stay motivated, or you're going to class, but you kind of zone out majority of the lecture. You are having a hard time focusing or staying on task. You're not turning your assignments in. You're staying in a training room longer because I need to do heat pack here, heat pack there. Like, can you do something? Like, those are all things, yes, you're taking care of your body, but internally, is there another reason where you're trying to stretch this a little longer before you actually show up on the court or, depending on the sport that you're playing? And so all of those things are little signals like it may be good to find somebody to talk to just not necessarily like something is mentally wrong with me, but having a person, having an outlet to process what's going on. What else is happening in your life? Are things at home difficult? Is somebody dealing with a medical situation? Are you having challenge in your personal relationships, significant other, friends, roommates? So you are an athlete, but you're also like a brother, a son, a cousin, a friend, and all of these other things. And we cannot compartmentalize like, oh, I'm an athlete and that I'm just here to perform, because you don't get to shut down all of those other things of yourself. So having like speakers or attending workshops or webinars or, just I want to go talk to, sports psychologist or a sport counselor just to see what they're about. Right. And even now, like I get parents whose kids are like 6 or 7 years old. I want you to talk to my kid because I feel like they're not telling me something. Great. I'm not going to go digging into their brain that something is wrong, but like, it's okay to talk to people about this. If you're feeling like this, let's normalize, let's validate, right?
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And for someone who has been dealing with mental health issues since I was like 5, I would have loved to have known that. I always thought there was something wrong with me. And I would have loved to have been able to talk to somebody. Of course, things were much different back then. But to know, just kind of helps normalize when you go and see somebody. And it's like, no, actually what you're going through at home or when this situation is actually perfectly normal in a sense that humans were all going through something and your emotions are taking the lead in ways that are stopping you. It's almost like a resistance, right? You start to resist getting up as soon as you need to get up in the morning. You start to resist wanting to like do the work because there becomes this fear around it and the sadness, and it's hard to get out of that unless you can, some people have different resources, and but also like I feel like talking to somebody is just like the number one thing that at least has helped me. Sounds like it helped you a lot as well.
Yeah. And, as athletes, and I know every division is different in terms of resources and folks that are available. But when I was a student athlete in my first year, my first point of contact was my academic advisor in the athletic department. And so he was the one who said, you want me to connect you with a counselor? And I was like, yes. Right. And so that point of contact sometimes can be coach. If you have good relationship with a coach, it can be an athletic trainer, it can be an academic advisor. And so like, kind of like Brandon said earlier, God puts people in your life on your path. Like those are your links to the next person.
Yeah. Brandon, I know it's your coaches at Texas State that actually reached out to me and said, hey, we want to know just how we can support, our players. And, we know that there is more to basketball than being a player, and we want to know how we can best support them and how we can start the conversation around mental health. So it sounds like you're with a team that at least is wanting to try and highlight that. How is that, do you feel like, compared to other teams that you've been on? Have you been a part of other teams that talk about mental health, or is this the first time you're talking about it?
No, this is the first time that this coaching staff actually wants to do something with mental health that I'm a part of. So I think this is beneficial to student athletes, not even for us, but for whoever's listening to us in our stories.
Yeah, and because like you opening up and just saying that you've been through some depression a couple of times in your life, helps other young high school athletes or younger kids even, like, or maybe even your teammates say like, wow, I've been, sad a couple of times too. Sounds like you have a good relationship though with your teammates, knowing that some of them have been through even some eating disorders and things,
Yeah. Yeah, I think being a part of a team helps though, because efforts pertaining to basketball, basketball are off the court and the court, off the court, whatever it is. I think having a team helps because they go through the same stuff you go through. Especially for me being a transfer, they have other newcomers coming in, so we kind of gel differently than the returners because we going through the same, not knowing certain stuff and things being hard, being in uncomfortable situations and stuff like that. So I think having a team has definitely helped me transition into every school I've been to.
Yeah. Whenever, are there ways that people have reached out to you and talked to you about what they're going through, or that there have been certain, I'm just curious, how can we help support others who may be going through something and they don't know how to reach out to their teammates? Is there a certain way they approached you, or is it just like a simple conversation?
You know, normally they text me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because they may think that social media is the highlight of everyone's life. It's not the tough times we go through, and don't show none of that. So they come to me because they may think I have it all figured out and it's all perfect because of what they see on social media. But just me being me, I think throughout my whole journey has made me someone to come to. And if someone needs somebody to talk to, like a lot of people say I give great advice about certain stuff. Like I don't always take my advice, but being able to give the advice helps a lot of people. And I didn't realize that until, sometimes there'll be people I never thought would message me about what they going through. Some people I never talked to. I had a couple people I went to high school with that I've never had a conversation with, but they just been following me throughout my whole career. And they'll just, DM me or text me, find a way to contact me and ask a question about something they're going through in life that they feel I can help them with. So I think, it's kind of a gift to be able to give good advice to people. And that'd be something people, talk good about.
Well, not only that, it says so much about you as a person and your heart. I'm going to feel like people have to have that trust in you, and you clearly have, done things throughout your life, whether it's social media or knowing you in high school or wherever, that have allowed them to feel like they can trust you.
Right.
That's really special. What do you see now? How are there ways that you feel like we as a society can support young athletes? I mean, what they're saying and, statistics, and Dr. Arna, you can probably speak more on this, is that, the pressures now completely surpass than the pressures that athletes had 5 years ago, because you're definitely expected to keep up with all of your grades, and the sport and the NIL now. There's so much more pressure. How can we support you?
I think doing what you're doing is a great thing. Just getting different people's stories out. I think reassuring athletes that mental health is a serious issue and it should be talked about, because besides sports, everybody go through life and it can get tough. It's going to get tough. So it's just about hearing how other people got through their adversities and, just spreading it.
Yeah. Can you speak on, Dr. Arna, about what we're hearing more about right now with these college athletes and their mental health?
Well, certainly you hit the nail on the head with like different aspects that they're having to deal with. And in addition to that, there's their things in their personal lives.
Yes.
Right. And so I agree, starting the conversation is a great place with no pressure. Nobody's trying to tell you to go and do something, right? I think an interesting thing to me is that majority of the people go see a primary care physician once a year to do just blood work, annual exam, that everything is okay. Do this same thing with mental health. Go see a counselor once a year. Is a good place to start. And see if you're noticing any benefit. Something that I do a lot is doing like prevention and outreach stuff. So, at UT, in my full-time position, we do a lot of that. Connecting with campus partners, connecting with different organizations outside of the university, and having those, like, let's meet for a coffee hour, right? Or let's call it a social hour. But then during that social hour, let's talk about how to deal with uncertainty or how to manage pressure. Or something that I see a lot, and I see it with athletes, is this idea of it has to be perfect. What is perfect?
Yeah.
Can you strive for excellence? This is like one of my hot topics, like what is the difference between perfect and excellent? Can we strive for excellence versus perfection? Because you're never going to reach this, and you're going to end up feeling depleted or disappointed or empty or depressed. Versus, this was excellent. Is there room for improvement? Yes. How can I do that? Okay, we can strategize how to do that. But working on eliminating these pressures, looking at what skills you have developed as an athlete in your sport, and how do I transfer these skills into my everyday life, right? Just because you're hardworking, you push through, you're dedicated, you're persevering, you're a great teammate, so you have, teamwork is important. How can I use all those skills that I already possess in a different area of my life? I'm not starting from scratch. It's just a matter of how can I transfer that?
Yeah, that's so true. And I think one of the things you said earlier too is try not to get too locked into the fact that that's all you are is an athlete.
Yeah.
There's so much more to you as a spiritual being, as a friend and son or daughter, and
So we're tapping into identity work now.
Yeah.
And as an athlete, like I know it by my, like in personal experience, like this athlete identity got developed so much that when I retired, and unfortunately wasn't really solely my decision, I retired partly because of the injury. Then I was like, now what? Who am I? And so starting conversation about that early, looking at what other talents do I have? How else can I use some of my hobbies or interests to develop other parts of the identity early on, so you're not stuck at, okay, I graduated, I didn't make it pro, or I didn't make it to the next level. What do I do now? Like, that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah. Do you, Brandon, find yourself getting like wrapped up in thoughts of like, I'm an athlete and I'm sorry, what did you call it again?
Athletic identity.
Athletic identity. Do you find yourself getting wrapped up in that?
Yeah, I think every athlete do, because of course, if you love the game you play, you want to be professional in it, you want to be, the best at it. But at the end of the day, everybody is not going to be professional, and everybody has different plans. We can grow up doing something my whole life, but we don't end up doing that for the rest of our life. So I feel like, in the beginning of my career, that was a major thing for me. Like, when something wouldn't go right, I would think, this may not work out for me. But then I had to realize that, although I want this to be my, I want to end, life playing basketball my whole life, but I might not. So I had to accept that reality. And I feel like everybody does too, though.
Yeah. Are there ways that that you try, like, do you have other hobbies or things that you like to do to separate yourself from basketball, or is it kind of like always on your mind?
No, it's not always on my mind because it can get stressful.
Okay.
I have things that balance out. Talking to people. I like holding genuine conversations with people. And it's a bad thing. I like shopping, though. It may be a disorder, but I love shopping, fashion, art. I've really been getting into art lately, so that's something. I went to an art museum recently in Austin, and it kind of made me feel like I was playing basketball. Like that love and that passion that I have for basketball, I kind of have it in art. So.
That's beautiful. Yeah, because there's so much to see out there. Yeah, absolutely. Are you finding that as Dr. Arna, as in the field of being a sports counselor, do you see that more people are reaching out to you on behalf of, athletes wanting to change the conversation, wanting to get help, parents wanting their kids to get help? Are you finding that you're seeing more of that?
Yeah, I think the conversations are starting to shift in that direction where people are kind of overcoming the stigma related to mental health in general, and then specifically, what does that mean or look like in the athletic world? So I am getting more, parents reach out to me with kids who are younger, so they're kind of starting early. And I think the cultural piece is also very important to take into account when we get those calls. And like, what resources did parents have, or didn't have? How was the conversation around mental health when they were growing up? Because folks who were able to kind of overcome some of the stereotypes of athletes, they just push through. There's nothing wrong with them, right? Or just the general one that is very prevalent today, like, oh, only crazy people go see, mental health clinicians. I'm like, can we eradicate this lingo because life is hard?
Yeah, can you tell me I feel like people, we do have this image of athletes and like you're invincible and you're these superheroes. I think it's great because we have heard like some gymnasts and tennis stars and even basketball players. I mean, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, I remember hearing Kevin Love talk about having so much anxiety he had to walk off the basketball court. And that was, I mean, he was definitely ahead of his time because not a lot of athletes talked about it back then. Do you see that people are starting to understand that athletes are human like everyone else? Or do you still feel like everybody has that image of them and that?
I think slowly, society in general is starting to make progress. It's slow and it's incremental, but I think one thing that helps, like in collegiate athletics, is that there's this movement to bring in sports professionals, whether that is, social workers, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists with, education and emphasis on sports. And they're becoming embedded into the athletic departments. So that's a step in the right direction. Are we at a level where we're able to help everyone? Not quite yet, because some departments just don't have a budget for it. Some folks have, one clinician on 300 or 400 athletes, right? And different universities. So like the odds are not great, but we're also trying to restructure something that has been very different historically.
Right. So one of the things that I want to go back to what you said about seeing a therapist even once a year, because I totally agree with you on that. I'm like, it should be baked into our system. Like our children, in order to even go to school, you have to have the letter from that they've gone to see their doctor and they have all of their shots and everything. Like to have that embedded in our system where once a year you have to go get the checkup. But one of the things too is that there's so many resources out there along with therapy that we know about nowadays, like journaling and meditating and just so many different things. I would love to know, Brandon, are there any things that maybe you don't consciously think are, to support your mental health, but maybe thinking of the big picture, like going to an art museum? Are there some things that you can speak on that maybe you do or, friends would do to kind of support their mental health?
I think music plays a big part in mental health. Just listening to different artists kind of go through the same thing you may be going through, and it's kind of crazy because you can hear a song and you can feel like that song was written for you. And I think music is a big, plays a big part in mental health.
I love that you said that.
I echo that.
Yeah.
I have some of my athletes that I work with, we work together strategically, develop a playlist. What are you going to listen before you warm up, right? Before a competition, or like depending on the outcome, let's have a playlist. Do we need something to kind of lift you up if things went wrong or you didn't perform at the level that you wanted to? So like, I definitely agree. Music, a lot of folks love that and they find a lot of comfort in that.
Yeah, that's what I used growing up. Like when there wasn't a therapist or anyone to talk to, I would find the music and my tape player.
I remember I had a we're revealing our age. Don't hold it against us.
But I would go to my room and I would listen for hours, just finding the music that would support me. And it does, and that's so right. Thank you for highlighting that, because it's true. There's so many different artistic forms out there that can not only bring us comfort, maybe in our hearts and our minds, but that can also then help bring us hope if we allow them just to kind of move through us in certain ways. Yeah. What are some things right now, specific resources that you feel like people can do at home?
Well, this is a very general question, right? So it kind of depends what a person's goal is, or what is the particular challenge that they may be dealing with. One thing that I advocate with all of my folks that I work with is, gratitude. You wake up in the morning, list 3 things. You don't want to list it, something that I do as I drive to work. I drive in silence, but I use that 20-minute drive to reflect on things that I'm grateful for. You want to do it before bedtime? Cool. Whatever. You want to do it before practice? Cool. Whatever works for your schedule. So gratitude thing. As an athlete, because there's always this strive to do more, do better, improve, something that I implement with a lot of them is at the end of the practice, take a moment, 5 minutes. What did I do well? and list those things, like actually black on white or, whatever color pen you want to use. Put it on a paper, not in a phone. Write it out. So what did you do well? And then instead of like, oh my gosh, I messed this up, I didn't do this well, what are my areas of improvement? So those two helps correct, if somebody is engaging in a lot of negative self-talk, it's correcting the language, the verbiage, the terminology they were using, and you're shifting your focus and your mindset to, let's look for growth and how can I improve versus let me beat myself across the head because I missed that 3-point shot at like 1 second before the game and we lost. It's all my fault, right? So to prevent that catastrophizing, to prevent irrational thinking, to prevent engaging in negative self-talk, start implementing this.
Yes.
And it's hard, right? I want to emphasize that starting to implement things to change your way of behaving, to change your way of thinking is hard. And folks can get disappointed. But look for small improvement. If you fall short, if you forget to do it one day, that's fine. Do it the next day. Give yourself a little bit of grace and look for that small incremental change.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. One, I mean, when I watch my son and all these 13-year-old boys, if they don't make a shot, I mean, or just if the game, I mean, it is just all over there. I mean, instead of, thinking as a whole, and his coach was so great, he was like, these are basketball players. They're not just shooters, and these kids, at that age especially, I think it's just thinking about that shot when make that shot. And so being able to highlight on that and, the things that you did well. And you're right, it is hard to make change. And if you look at yourself, Brandon, like when you were young and like 7 years old and picking up that basketball, you may not have been doing all the tricks that you're doing now because it took time and it took a practice, but then you become great at what you're doing, right? And that's the same thing as it's just, trying a little bit every day if you can, a few times a week if you can, just to subtly change that mindset and to know that, you're out of the whole game, there were some amazing plays or things that you did that, to highlight that, and gratitude is just huge. Are those things that you think that you would implement, or in that even if you told your friends about, do you think that they would implement those kind of?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to implement writing down the positive things I've done and improve it. Because, saying the improvement is kind of looking at your wrongdoings in a positive light. So I feel like that's something that a lot of athletes should do, instead of saying, I did this wrong. Saying that you need to improve, and this is a different kind of, like she said, a perspective of how you look at the things you have done that's not correct.
Absolutely.
Another thing is like when we don't perform well, or let's say you lost, having give yourself a set time. Like, okay, I'm going to mope around for the rest of the day, right? Or I'm going to mope around for whatever. I'll be mad for next 2 hours. And so setting a time limit on that is like, okay, I'm going to be mad, sad, cry, whatever. But after that 2 hours is up, or after, tomorrow, I'm not dwelling on that anymore. So the quicker you can move from some frustration or from loss or from however you evaluated your performance that was more on a negative side, the quicker you can move from that, the faster you can focus on, okay, what do I need to do? What is the next game?
I love that, because then also you're not suppressing that feeling, because the more that you just suppress and try to like gloss over something that is really bothering you, then that actually grows and can make things worse. Instead, it's like, yeah, I'm going to be really upset about that or however I'm feeling for 2 hours, and then, then it's time to reevaluate.
But then what you're also doing, you're limiting kind of getting into that depressive state until like Wednesday or Thursday. And they're like, oh, now I have to be all upbeat and get ready for like Saturday or Friday game. No, you allowed yourself small amount of time, and then you shifted your focus, and you avoid these ups and downs of depression and kind of like, oh, I'm okay, I'm all good and ready. Because then like part of you is like, this is not really authentic. I'm not quite good and ready. I have to be because I have game coming up.
Yeah, no, yeah. So once again, gratitude, writing down the things that you did well, and then
room for improvement. Room for improvement,
and then allow yourself, an hour or two, whatever you need, Try to keep it maybe under 2 hours though.
Well,
if you can.
it depends. You know, when I first started, I was like, okay, for the rest of the weekend, you know, I would race on Saturday. I'm just going to give myself another day and a half to just be, you know, in my feelings. But then with time, I was able to shorten that time.
Okay.
So give yourself some grace that you're trying something new and see what works best for you. And maybe some games or competitions, you're going to be okay with, you know, dealing with it in 2 hours. Other times you may be like, you know what, this one is tough. This one, you know, championship game, like, oh shoot, this one is a big one. You know,
That's true. Yeah, some games may matter a little more, and so you may need a little more time if things didn't go the way you wanted them to.
so it's not like prescriptive. It has to be like this. You know, just tune in with yourself. Where am I? How am I feeling?
I definitely use the 24-hour rule. So whatever goes in, you know, whatever happens in that day, 24 hours, just leaving in that day. Because, you know, we're not promised tomorrow, so we don't want to dwell on something that happened yesterday. And we have another opportunity to, you know, get it right. So I'll definitely implement a 24-hour rule.
I love that. We're not promised tomorrow. It sounds like faith is a huge part in your life.
Definitely.
Yeah, that is for me too. Dr. Arna, Brandon, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been such a pleasure, and I hope that people sense, you know, that we can start talking about mental health, and especially with our young athletes, and really keeping the conversation going so we can support you all. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us here at Speak as One. I want to thank Dr. Arna and Brandon for joining us here today. And you can check out their stories along with many others at Speak as One on our YouTube channel. And please like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.